Hey guys, welcome back to the Emerson 571 restoration project. It's been a while since I did part one, in which we did a triage video. We popped out the chassis, took a look at it, did a slow power up, and it kind of worked. We got a raster, and I think we might have gotten some sort of reception. Anyways, got a bit of a time crunch here. Got about a month before this and some other sets are being picked up, so I want to get them done. So I'm just going right in to do a recap. If you recall, it's mostly original. So it looked like there might have been some old repairs, but basically just a straightforward recap. What's unusual about this set, though, is this. The power supply and the forest of electrolytics. So this has five, count them, 25 Z6 rectifiers. Each one of these tubes is a dual diode. So we're talking 10 diodes. And, just to keep things fun, a ballast to limit the surge current. You turn this puppy on. So, it is sort of a it is a hot chassis set. So we have phenolic mounting blocks, we got some insulation cardboard on the back. Got all these caps mounted on insulating wafers, most of them. So the chassis is going to one side of the AC line, but there is a power transformer. That's used a couple unusual ways. One, the primary has sort of an autoformer where there's a few extra turns to bump up the 117 it was designed for to 125 to power these 5 tubes, which are 25 volt filaments wired in series. And then the power supply, it has both positive and negative voltage doubler action. That's what all these caps and all these rectifiers are about. Some of these diodes are just paralleled up to increase the current capacity. But all this mess is just to provide the positive, well, I shouldn't say just. It's there to provide the plate voltages and some negative voltages as needed. This guy supplies the filament juice to the remainder of the tubes. These guys. The ones over on that side. Aside from that, it's fairly conventional 10-inch 10BP4 type with, of course, we got a fly back in there and a damper tube and a horizontal output tube and all that good stuff. Another oddity, I just realized this as I started doing the recap, I glanced over here and noticed this torn up metal. So this was very likely not the original tuner, unless I did it at the factory. What's in here is a standard tuner, literally I think it's a company that made them called Standard Tuner, which is the same kind you see in Admiral and other sets where it's a drum tuner with removable sections. And now that I'm looking at it, yeah, the shaft length is not the same. So, just part of the history of the set. So I'm going to go and keep on keeping on. I'm using Adaptacaps, but these are not the standard, some of these are not the standard ones that you can buy from that vendor. In other words, they are not the standard 4-section larger variety. These are the ones that he officially sells, but he has sent me some samples in the past of these guys, which are smaller. Notice these guys are a bit smaller. And a number of them, well, here are the ones I took out, it's just a single cap in there. So it may look like there's a ton of electrolytics, but about half of these is just a single capacitor. That's why on these replacements here, there's just one cap. They might be thinking, well, geez, why would I go to that much trouble? Well, when you see the wiring below, and it's kind of complicated, it's easier for me to just bust these out, knock out the rivets, pop one of these guys in, pop in the capacitor, and just attach the 2 wires that were going to this to that. Rather than figuring out a place to mount a terminal strip where I got clearance and reroute the wiring, might have to extend the wires and then get very confused on what went where. So that's why I'm going with this technique. Don't have a ton of these, but I have enough to finish this project. The smaller ones, I should say. The mounting holes are closer together. But anyways, in case you see these and wondering where I got them, it doesn't officially sell them, but I'm going to shoot him a note and say, hey, I've been finding these pretty useful. Can you, do you have a supply of them? Can I buy some more from you? Because I have my own to do. I was going to do both at the same time, but I don't have enough time. But what I am going to do is I took a bunch of reference photos, and of course I have the video I'm shooting now as a reference, so when I do mine, I hope that'll be enough. And if I have time, which is very unlikely, I might start tinkering with mine. But I've never powered mine up. Mine's a mess. So, at any rate, that's where we're going to go. So hopefully when I pick up recording, the rest of these will be replaced, and then I'm going to power it back up, see where things stand, and then we got a whole bunch of paper caps down below to replace, and a bunch of tubes to check, which I haven't even done yet. Well, this is turning out to be a weird one for a few reasons. One, yeah, the tuner is definitely a replacement. Probably not a bad thing, assuming it works right, because the original was a wafer type, like a giant rotary switch, and those aren't so reliable, and I suspect that's why it was replaced. It used a trio of 6J6s, kind of a primitive design, but this being a standard one that was it's rugged, it's reliable, dependable, a little bit newer design with one 6J6 and a 6CB6. But there's more than that. It doesn't match any schematic I can find. I know of 3 versions that exist, maybe 4. So there's 2 versions of SAMs. There's the early, which is this, that has the 525Z6s, and then there's a newer that replaced the 25Z6s with selenium. Also online, there's the original Emerson factory service manual. It's been scanned and published, and that shows 2 versions of the schematic. One matches this pretty well, and the other is, well, they both use the 25Z6s, and but there are some subtle differences. I think one uses a ballast and one does not, something like that, or a different type of ballast tube. But it's hard to say because the set has been worked on quite a bit in the past, and fairly well done, so sometimes I'm having trouble figuring out if it's a original cap or not. Particularly these guys, which I replaced because when I was doing the adaptive caps, they were in the way. So this guy up here, 0.047, that's going to this guy, which is the vertical blocking transformer. You know, if we look on the schematic for that, I'm going to find it. This guy. They show a 0.25. I have a 0.05. Furthermore, this point with 4.7K and 0.005 come together, I have a 0.02 microfarad cap that doesn't exist in any flavor of this set, and that's this guy right here. Also, these 2 guys, the 2.005s, they show going to the negative on this capacitor where the 0.022 is going. But in this set, they're going up to that guy, which is all very confusing. What makes it more confusing is if you follow out this power supply. So here's those 2 caps I'm talking about, and this would be the common return side. What's that going to? It's going to this point. So, in other words, some stuff is grounded, some goes to other odd places. So this is the vertical integrator. Normally these caps would simply be going to ground, but in this they actually go to, I guess this is the positive power supply output. And this is this is the positive power supply rail. Just look at the orientation of the electrolytics, and then look at the one up higher. We have the positives going to ground. So the one they show higher up, we usually think of things on the top being positive and on the bottom being negative. And this set, the stuff along the bottom is positive. And this, which is going through the focus coil, looks like it's kind of the main supply. If you look, it goes right to cathode. So this is actually the most negative voltage in the set up here. And all those 25Z6s, if you take a closer look, a lot of them are wired in parallel. So yes, total between the 5 tubes, there's 10 diodes, but there are not 10 individual circuits going through this. So I think we have 2 voltage doublers, maybe, And these are wired in parallel, and then these are wired in parallel. So we have probably about the same voltage at this point. One's positive, one's negative. So a couple hundred volts, something like that. Specify it on here. But that's on this flavor of the schematic. Mine is a little bit different. For example, this flavor, they show these two resistors, which I think are in the ballast. But then they have others like R107, R106, R104B. A ballast in mine has multiple sections, and it seems to have more stuff in it. I don't have any power resistors under here, so I think all the resistors needed in the power supply are located inside the ballast in my revision. Anyways, what am I getting at? What I'm getting at is I can't really rely on the service info. I have to be really careful and replace one part at a time and just go with whatever I see and go with that value and assume it worked at some point with these component values. If I do run into the weeds and have trouble getting it to work, I may just go find the schematic that's closest to this and change things to match. Like maybe I take that capacitor out because it's not in any of the service info. And it doesn't make sense to me either why it would be there. Because these RC values are chosen to have a specific time constant to work with the vertical circuit. So adding an extra big cap at this point just doesn't make any sense to me. You would think it would swamp out the signal. Anyways, do have all those electrolytics done. Paper caps. So one good indication too that it's been worked on is we have all different kinds. We have blue, light blue, and some of the soldering. Well, that one's actually probably original when it's not soldered that well. But also some of the soldered joints, like down in there, that's a little crummy looking. So here's another odd thing about this set. It actually does have some kind of more sophisticated features like horizontal and vertical centering pots, which complicates the power supply and the circuitry. I was wondering why when I was recapping this, there are two 1000 microfarad caps, which is a rather large value for back then. Those are there to filter any potential noise out of the horizontal and vertical centering controls. And electrically, it looks like a decent design. The construction of it, though, leaves a bit to be desired. It's not that well made. Even the actual chassis itself, it flexes. They use a little bit thinner steel, less bracing on it, so I can actually bend it when I do this. And the way they did the insulating is it's a hot chassis with just some cardboard discs here and there. I don't think that's quite up to modern UL specs. Boy, that control is really loose. So, and then again, to the real repairs, it's probably not the original control right there. It's not secured. And, yeah, so I'm struggling a bit. Some of the wiring is kind of cheap. This, I think it's vertical output transformer, has natural rubber wiring. It's got cracks in the insulation. I'm being real careful not to touch those wires so the insulation doesn't fall off. And then the bizarre power supply. I touched on this a bit when I did the initial look at this chassis. I'll just briefly go over it again. Why would they do this? Well, if you work on early TVs, you have three basic designs. One, very robust, with a full-on, big honking power transformer and maybe one or two 5U4s, whole bunch of filters, big old filter choke, kind of brute force it. Expensive because the more iron, the more money. The other extreme would be series strung. There's no power transformer at all the tube filaments are wired in series, and you use a voltage doubler right off the AC line. And then there's the third option, which is this, which is a hybrid approach, where you use a power transformer for something. I've seen sets where all the tube filaments are wired in series, and they use a transformer for B+. I've also seen the opposite, where it's a voltage doubler off the AC line for B+, and they use a transformer just for the filaments, which is what this set does, basically. What I can't quite wrap my head around is having all these extra tubes, all these extra caps. To use a transformer, it's about half the normal size. Did they really save anything? Or were they doing it just to be different? Or did they get a phenomenal deal on 25Z6s? I don't know. Another wrinkle to it is these caps. These are pretty crappy caps. They're Sprague, but they're only 75 degrees C. I don't think I've ever seen that before. Every vintage cap I recall ever looking at, they're all been 85C. But all of these caps, even though they're name brand caps, they're 75C. So in other words, are they using cheaper caps? So perhaps they got a deal on a bunch of lower grade capacitors and they got a deal on a ton of 25Z6s, and that's how they justified it. So then there's the ballast too. They had to have a custom ballast made. I think it's specific to this chassis, this set. So you add all that up versus using an off-the-shelf TV transformer. How could they have saved enough to justify using the weird design? I don't know. But when we did our first power-up, it kind of worked. I've been very careful to keep everything the way it was, just put in new parts. So I'm getting ready to put the tubes back in. I did identify some bad ones. I need to replace those. And I did take out the picture tube to save some weight, make it easier to work on. So I got my trusty 5AXP4 in here. So next thing you'll see is me attempting to turn this set back on. Well, this is certainly a relief. I popped the tubes back in and fired it up and immediately got a raster. Well, after the tubes warmed up anyways. So apparently all this work is still sound, and the vertical oscillator is oscillating because, well, we've got vertical, we've got horizontal. Okay, so now I will proceed with replacing all those paper caps. I was tightening down this loose control, which is horizontal and vertical hole, and I noticed that none of the wires are soldered. They're just wrapped around. Some of them not even going through the eyelets on the lugs. They're just flopping around. I'm guessing, again, somebody was working on this. Maybe they temporarily did that to see if this control would work. I don't know. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Right now I'm going to reattach the wires, but we'll have to see if there's issues with horizontal and vertical hold. Maybe this control does need to get replaced. I did a bit more recapping. In particular, replaced a few axial electrolytics that were down below and a few paper caps. And now I'm fitting in a signal, and we can almost kind of sort of receive something. So I'm rotating the channel clunker now. I'm feeding in a window circle, so a box with a circle test pattern. And it seems like, play around with the controls, this is horizontal hold, I believe. You can almost kind of sort of see something. I believe this is contrast. Brightness. I haven't done the horizontal yet. Whoa. Obviously we got more work to do, but we got plenty of recapping to do. But hey, how about that? Just fine tuning a little. It's as good as it gets. Yeah, I'm actually picking it up on 2 channels. The channel slugs are probably off a bit, but alright. Progress. I like it when you get incremental progress when you start recapping, and bit by bit it gets better and better. Awesome. So, I'll get back to it. Just did more recapping, especially on the vertical circuit, and set is playing quite a bit better. Horizontal lock is a bit twitchy, but I haven't really done any work on that yet. But the vertical locks pretty solidly. And I tweaked the height and linearity too, so it's starting to look pretty good. I think I'll go after the horizontal next, so that'll be the stuff under the horizontal output tube, damper tube, and so on in that area. I'm pleasantly surprised, I gotta say, considering how confusing this is, and not the greatest construction, and all the work that's been done to it in the past that we're at this point. So I want to turn my attention for a moment to the cabinet. This is the main reason I really like this set, is I think it's a really, really pretty cabinet with all the different toner lacquers used to give contrasting colors. And this is in really good shape. It's very dirty, but it should clean up very well. Decals look to be in good shape. We've got a channel plate brass with, yeah, that's recessed a little bit. I just tacked it on with 2 nails, assuming that's original. Okay. So I'm going to do the usual. I'll clean it with Gojo, and it doesn't really have any alligatoring, so I don't even know if I'll do any light sanding. And I may not even spray any fresh lacquer on it. I might do a little Howard's to make some of these dings a little darker, or use a touch-up marker, but that might be it. But one thing that is confusing to me, I noticed right away when this set arrived, is that the front is loose. It can actually slide around a little bit. So I don't know how this is supposed to be attached. If it's screwed from the back, I'm not sure why they would make the front removable, because the pitch tube is mounted to the chassis and it all slides in from the back, so there's really no reason to ever take this off, unlike the RCAs I've worked on recently where you install the picture tube from the front. So let's flip this thing around and see if we can find out the problem. Also quite compact for the time. I didn't notice that before. It looks like there's a slight slope downwards on the top. Nice little touch there. Okay. Oh, wow, that's interesting. So it looks like there's a washer and a wing nut at the top, and at the bottom there's a fastener that sure looks like it's intended that you can easily remove the front, and I'm wondering if that's to possibly get at some of the tubes that are located in the front. There aren't any adjustments that are hidden behind the control panel you would need to get to that I can see. Oh, they seem to have put more time and effort and energy and money into the cabinet than anything else. It's quite well made. We got nice curved details here, lots of bracing. And the back is one of the most impressive TV backs I've ever seen, where it's wood with perforated metal in the middle. They're all drilled out or stamped out. And we got decals on the back, and it actually is a polarized plug, so it's a hot chassis set, but at least this, for the time, it was kind of a novel thing to have a polarized plug on it to ideally make the chassis neutral rather than the hot side. But yeah, I mean, most backs is just a hunk of masonite or hardboard with some holes in it, but this was actually, you know, we've got joinery on it and stuff. So, nifty. We can see the model 571 series. Alright, so that will make this kind of interesting or easier for me probably to touch up. Or maybe that was just to clean the glass. I've recently been working on a Zenith that had something similar where they take off a couple screws in the front, and the front of it tilts back so you can clean the screen easily. That is very thoughtful and quite unusual for the time to let you do that. So let's see, with that out of the way, the front comes off. Alright, let's see. Took out the wing nut, of course I'll replace the missing one. So, oh yeah, look at that. right off. So we can definitely go to town cleaning this. And just like the rest of the cabinet, that is a substantial slab of wood. Quite well made. Very sturdy. Well done, Emerson. Nice, thoughtful design. Starting to do a little cleaning with pumice free hand cleaner, and yes, of course, it's quite filthy. Also was able to pry this off without too much trouble, just even with my fingers. Just those two little brad nails came out easily. And I really got to wonder, is this really the original channel plate? Because it didn't quite fit. They cut out a notch on the top of it, and it just seems so crude on what is otherwise a very finely made cabinet. I'll have to look at some reference photos. And yeah, I have my own instance of this same set, but there were some production variations, and I honestly don't remember. I can't get at mine right now, and I don't remember quite how it looks in the front. I'll keep this with the set. It's part of the history. And I don't see, well, yeah, okay, so here's another indication that it's probably not the original, is it? There is a word tuning up above here, and the way this was attached, it was blocked it off. So that's weird. Let me see if I can get a gander at mine. It's actually just right over here. Yeah, so mine does have a different channel plate on it. It's a little hard to see down there with some light. But, yeah. There we go. Yeah, so you can't really see the tuning decal on mine either. It's kind of cut off. But it's definitely a different style. Weird. I finished with the Gojo, then applied some Howards. I'm waiting a couple minutes and I'm going to wipe off the excess. That's why it's a little mottled looking in areas. But yeah, boy, isn't that pretty. And set, I think, has had an interesting history. Aside from the old repairs, the swapped out tuner, the goofy channel plate, there's also some indication there was a plaque up here at some point. There are two holes and a slight discoloration, rectangular area. Could have been somebody's name of a company, or property of, I mean, who knows. And the main cabinet cleaned up quite nicely as well. I'm putting on some Howard's mahogany right now. And you're supposed to let it sit for a little bit and wipe off the excess. And then after that's done, I'm going to go with some Howard's Feed and Wax. Sometimes I use Oz cream polish, but in this case, because it's a very mellow, nice looking wood with different tones in that, I'm going to go with Howard's. It tends to give a more mellow finish. It's beeswax and orange oil. Downside to it is beeswax is soft. It melts at a lower temperature than other waxes like paraffin. So it's a trade-off. I think it makes the wood glow better. It smells real nice. But if you do this, it tends to leave fingerprints more. But yeah, you'll see what I mean when it's done. Here it is after the Howard's Feed and Wax. Now it does need to set up a bit, and then I need to buff off the excess, so it's actually a little damp right now. But if I was to touch this, it's definitely leaving some fingerprints, just a little hard to film. There, I think you can see them there, right? There you go. Yeah, so. It'll set up a bit, I'll buff it off, maybe do a couple passes and take another look at it. But all that aside, that is one really pretty cabinet. And that's it's something that Emerson was known for, both the radios and TVs, especially the ones they outsourced to Ingram, I think it is. This one wasn't, but I do have one that was. I picked up a few years ago that definitely needs a refinishing, and I'm really itching to get to it because it's going to look so pretty after it's all refinished and polished up. But anyways, that's it for this. Gotta clean the safety glass, put that back together. Now let's get back to finishing up the electronics with it.